Hello, thank you for listening. My name is Klaus Richter, and I want to tell you a story from a time when I was just 28 years old, a lifetime ago. Before the war, my world was simple. It smelled of wet cobblestones, cheap coffee, and the ink on a filed report. I was a police officer in Hamburg. My world was one of straight lines and clear rules. There was the law, and there were those who broke it. My job was to be the barrier between the two, to maintain the structure of things. I believed with all the certainty of a young man that any problem could be solved with discipline, observation, and the correct application of procedure. Order was not just a concept, it was a physical force, something you could build and defend. When the war came, they told me my skills were needed elsewhere. They traded my patrol beat for the endless blue expanse of the sky. They gave me a Messerschmitt Bf 109, and my world of order simply expanded. The sky became my new precinct. The enemy bomber, the enemy fighter, they were just lawbreakers, intruders in our sovereign space. My gun sight was my magnifying glass, my cannons the long arm of the law. I approached every dogfight like an investigation, every patrol like a beat. I was still Officer Richter, just with a much faster patrol car and a much deadlier purpose. I thought I was defending the ultimate order, the sanctity of the homeland. I was so sure of my role, so certain of the lines I was defending. People talk about the Battle of Kursk as the greatest tank battle in history, the turning point on the Eastern Front. They speak of grand strategies and entire armies clashing. For me, it was none of those things. For me, Kursk was the day the pavement beneath my feet cracked open and swallowed everything I believed in. It was the moment my neat, orderly world was set on fire. And it began, as the worst things often do, not with the roar of an enemy engine in my ears, but with a frantic, desperate voice crackling through my headset. A plea for help from the ground, from the heart of the chaos I so desperately feared. The air over the Kursk salient in July of 1943 was not air. It was a thick, gritty soup you had to chew. A mixture of engine exhaust, black smoke from burning panzers, and the fine, choking dust of the Russian steppe, kicked up by millions of boots and thousands of tank treads. Even at 10,000 feet, you could taste the battle. It coated your teeth. The sun was a pale, indifferent disk behind the haze. My Gustav, my beautiful, deadly Messerschmitt, felt less like a master of the sky and more like a fly trapped in a dirty jar. We'd been flying constant sorties for days, escorting bombers, dueling with their Yak and Lavachkin fighters. That was clean work, geometric, a deadly dance with an opponent you could see. It was the law I understood. But this day was different. The great offensive, Operation Citadel, had failed. The word wasn't spoken aloud, but you could feel it. The tide had not just turned, it had become a tidal wave, and it was now washing back over us. Our ground forces were in retreat, and a retreat is where order dies its ugliest death. The radio crackled again. The voice was young, panicked, an infantry officer. His unit was being decimated, caught in the open on a road south of Prokhorovka. They were being shelled, harassed by partisans, falling apart. He was pleading for air support. He gave us coordinates, but they were vague, desperate. On the main dirt road, a column, for God's sake, hurry. My Staffelkapitän's voice cut through the static, calm as ever. Richter, you and France, go low, see what you can do, break them up. France gave a quick jowl over the radio. I just clicked my transmitter twice. I rolled my fighter onto its port wing, the horizon pivoting violently. The ground, a patchwork of scorched brown and sickly green, rushed up to meet me. The familiar pressure pushed me into my seat. This was ground attack work, job-o duty. It was dirty, ugly business. You weren't fighting another pilot. You were a hawk stooping on mice. There was no honor in it. It was pest control. But it was the job. An order was an order. The procedure was clear. As I descended, the world transformed from a map into a landscape of raw, bleeding detail. The neat lines of the front had vanished, replaced by a smear of chaos. I could see the road below, a long, pale scar on the earth. It was choked with movement. My policeman's eye, the skill I'd honed on the streets of Hamburg, took over. I began to catalog the scene, to impose order on it. I saw the shapes of trucks, some military green, some civilian gray. I saw men in field gray uniforms, trudging along, their shoulders slumped. Interspersed were horse-drawn carts piled high with belongings. It was a river of desperation. This must be it. The retreating column. My mind flashed for just a second to a traffic jam I once had to untangle near the Hamburg docks. A mess of lorries, cars, and horse carts, but it was an orderly mess. I had walked among them, my uniform crisp, my authority unquestioned, and directed them one by one until the flow was restored. Order from chaos. That was my purpose. I looked down from my cockpit. This was the same problem, just on a monstrous scale. My job was to clear the blockage, to allow our men to escape. The enemy harassing them were the blockage. "Klaus, I see them," France's voice said, a tight knot of tension. "Left flank of the column in the trees." I followed his gaze. I saw it too. Flashes of movement in the sparse woods lining the road. Muzzle flashes, tiny, angry sparks. They were firing on the column. Partisans, or maybe a forward element of the Red Army. They were the lawbreakers, the ones disrupting the retreat. My target was clear. My purpose was defined. I felt that old, familiar click of certainty in my mind. The world snapped back into black and white. Protect the column, destroy the threat, restore order. "I'm going in," I said, my voice steady. I armed the cannons. The small green light on my instrument panel glowed. I pushed the stick forward, the nose of my 109 dipping towards the earth. The whine of the Daimler-Benz engine deepened into a terrifying roar. The ground swelled, details exploding into clarity. The trees rushed towards me. I saw figures running between them. I centered the lead figure in my Rivi gun sight. My thumb hovered over the firing stud on the control column. But something was wrong. The column itself, it was messy, not a clean military formation. My observant eye caught details that didn't fit the procedure. There were women in the column. I could see their headscarves, flashes of color against the drab landscape. There were old men, too, bent over walking sticks. They were mixed in with the soldiers, a chaotic jumble of military and civilian, refugees. They were our refugees fleeing the Soviet advance. My mind registered this, but the logic of the mission overrode it. The orders were to protect the column. The threat was in the woods. The people on the road were to be saved. The people in the trees were to be killed. A simple, brutal equation. My thumb pressed down. The world dissolved into noise and vibration. The entire airframe of my fighter shuddered as the 20 cannons in the wings and the 13 machine guns in the nose opened up. A stream of fire and explosive shells poured from my aircraft. Tracers, like angry yellow fingers, reached out and touched the tree line. Earth, wood, and something else erupted where my shells struck. I held the trigger down for a 3-second burst, a professional burst, controlled, orderly. I swept the tree line, walking the stream of death along the flank of the desperate column on the road. But the plane is not a surgeon's scalpel. It is a butcher's axe, and in the chaos my aim drifted. Or perhaps the figures I was targeting ran. They ran from the trees, breaking cover, desperate to escape the fire. They ran towards the road, towards the column, towards the civilians. I pulled up sharply, the G-force a heavy blanket crushing me into my seat. I banked hard for a second pass to assess the damage. This was procedure. Always confirm your work. The smoke was thick, acrid. But as I came around, lower this time, the wind had torn a momentary gap in the black cloud, and my policeman's eye, my greatest gift, delivered my damnation. I saw what I had done. My shells hadn't just hit the trees. The edge of my strafing run had sliced into the road itself, into the column I was sent to protect. A farm cart was on its side, splintered, its contents strewn across the dirt, but it wasn't military supplies. It was bedding, pots, a wooden chair. A horse lay kicking in its harness. And the people I had seen were not just soldiers. I saw the bright red of a woman's scarf, now a dark, wet stain in the dust. I saw a small shape that wasn't a soldier, wasn't a man. It was a child, lying beside a broken doll. My mind refused to process it. The image burned itself onto my eyes. The colors were too vivid. The scene too silent from my cockpit. The line between protector and destroyer, between order and chaos, had not just been blurred. I had erased it with cannon fire. My stomach hollowed out. A cold, black vacuum opened inside me where my certainty used to be. The radio was still crackling. France was shouting something, maybe about another pass. I didn't hear him. The only sound was the drone of my engine and the frantic, screaming pulse in my own ears. I had followed procedure. I had identified a threat. I had acted to neutralize it. And in doing so, I had slaughtered the very people I was sworn to defend, both as a pilot and as a policeman. The law I was enforcing was a lie. The order I was imposing was the chaos of the grave. I pulled back on the stick, not with any conscious thought, but with a primal need to get away. I climbed. I fled vertically, escaping the horror I had created, leaving the smoke and the screams behind. The higher I went, the quieter it became. The ground shrunk back into an abstract map. The burning cart became a tiny black smudge. The bodies disappeared. Order was restored, but it was the sterile, empty order of altitude and distance. I was alone in the cold, clean air, a murderer in a tidy blue sky. I flew back to the airfield. I landed the plane perfectly. I filled out my mission report, my hand steady. Engaged enemy partisans harassing retreating column. Threat neutralized. Words. Neat, orderly words on a page to cover up an act of unspeakable chaos. I followed all the procedures, all the discipline. I clung to like a drowning man to a piece of wood, but it was hollow. The structure was gone. Before the war, my world was built on a simple truth. You separate the innocent from the guilty. You protect the one from the other. In that cloud of dust over Kursk, I learned that war melts those lines into a single, horrifying gray. From 1,000 feet up, a child's doll can look like a soldier's kit bag. A woman's scarf can be lost in the color of a uniform. I was a policeman who had fired on the very crowd he was meant to be protecting. How do you file a report on that? What paragraph in what manual covers the damnation of your own soul? I spent the rest of the war flying, fighting. I was a good pilot. I shot down many enemy planes. But I never again felt that certainty. Every time I looked through my gun sight, I saw that road. I saw that red scarf. I saw that doll. The clean geometry of the dogfight was gone, replaced by the sickening fear of the mistake you can never unmake. The most dangerous thing in this world is not a man with a gun. It's a man with a gun who is absolutely certain he is right. A man who believes his orders give him a clarity that God himself does not possess. I was that man. I flew with the conviction that I was the thin line of order in a world of chaos. And with my own hands, I ripped a hole in the fabric of my own world and became the very thing I despised. Certainty is a luxury we cannot afford. It is a poison for men, especially for those given the power of life and death. This memory is a part of my logbook that was never written down. It is a piece of shrapnel I have carried in my heart for over 50 years. It's heavy. Help me carry it, subscribe, and ensure these stories are never left to rust in silence.